Hey everybody, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio, back in the studio today to share with you my 6 quick tips for recording drums. Number 1, you need a good sounding set of drums. The drums need to sound good. You also need a good player. A good sounding drum kit that's tuned correctly and a player that knows how to play the drums and how to hit the drums correctly makes a lot of difference in the sound you get on a drum recording. Biggest factor in your drum sound if you're recording acoustic drums are the drums themselves. In my case, I'm using a vintage 1967 Ludwig kit. These drums sound great when you record them. You can mic them close mic, you can mic them Glenn Johns, just about any way these drums are going to sound good. Vintage drums have a nice tone. Now I've kind of used these with Evans EC2 heads instead of coated heads on the toms. I like my toms to resonate and have a little bit of a long decay because the style that I play, I don't know, that's just what I like. It's what I like to hear when I'm mixing too. Now if you don't get enough decay out of your toms or any of the drums, or you need to bring up the resonance, you can always use a compressor with a fast release, and that will lengthen the decay of the drum a little bit. Number 2. This may be a little bit controversial with drummers because many of them will not like the fact that you ask them to raise their cymbals up higher than they're used to playing, but that does minimize the cymbal bleed into the close mics on the drums, and that means a lot of times you don't have to gate mics and things like that and do all this extra work after the fact. That's the way I've learned to play drums, is with the cymbals a little bit higher because I mainly play in the studio. It really does make a huge difference if you can raise the cymbals up, even the hi-hat. Hi-hat stands are adjustable too. Raise that hi-hat stand up, raise your ride cymbal up a little bit so that it's not bleeding into the floor tom mic. You can see I have the ride cymbal quite a distance above the floor tom, which is not the normal way drummers like their ride cymbal, but this really helps a lot to keep that ride cymbal out of that floor tom mic right there. I'm used to playing this way and I get great sounds with that, so if you can convince the drummer the importance to get a good sound on tape, this is a good way to do it. Number 3, aim the mics across the head of the drum for more of the body of the drum and more tone. If you want more attack, aim the mic more at the point of stick impact on the head of the drum. So that's 2 different ways to get 2 different sounds. Personally, I like to aim the mics across the head because I like the resonance of the drum. I like a little bit longer decay on my toms especially, so that's a technique I use almost all the time. It also saves you from having to have a bottom mic because you get more of that shell sound without using 2 mics because some of us don't have enough mics to mic everything top and bottom. So that's a good tip. This is an I5 on the second rack tom, and you'll notice I have this aimed across the head and not up and pointing down at the head. It's actually not very far above the rim at all, and it comes over the rim just a little bit, maybe a 1/4 inch, and is aimed across that head so that it's not just getting the stick impact, but it's also picking up the resonance of the whole drum. I don't have enough mics to mic the top and bottom of the toms, so this technique works really well for me and probably will for you too. Number 4, I picked this tip up from Sylvia Massey. She talks about aiming all of your drum mics the same direction. And I tried this technique and it really does work. It cuts down on phase and gives you a more powerful, more cohesive sound on the entire kit when all the mics are pointing roughly in the same direction. Now I don't do that with overheads, usually they're pointing down, but on the close mics I generally try to get them pointing all the same direction. And it does minimize phase issues by doing that. So that's a really great tip that I picked up from her, and check out some of the videos. She's featured on a lot of videos on YouTube, and I find that her work is great and she has a lot of good ideas. Look at these mics here. You can see the hi-hat mic there on the far left, then the first 2 rack tom mics. Please excuse the mess in the background. My studio is kind of small and it is full of a lot of stuff and I have to rearrange all the time to make these videos, so excuse the mess. And look that I have all of these microphones Over here we can see the same thing on the floor tom. They're all pointing roughly the same way. So is the kick drum mic down there inside the kick drum. They're all pointing roughly the same direction. While I'm on the subject of drum mics, I want to show you one of my secret weapons. This is a PVM 480. And this mic has a perfect sound for a hi-hat. I don't ever have to EQ this mic at all. It actually is fairly warm on the hi-hat, if there is such a thing. I really like this. I've been using this mic for probably the last 12 to 15 years, almost always on hi-hat. But I feel like it could probably be used on a lot of things. These mics are not that inexpensive though. Believe it or not, this is a $200 or $300 mic, or maybe they're even a little more now. I've had this one for a long time, and I think I paid at least $250 for this microphone. Anyway, that's a secret weapon of mine for hi-hat mic especially. I love this thing. Number 5, your overhead mic placement is pretty important. If you're using a spaced pair of overhead mics, it's a really good idea to measure the distance from each of those spaced pair to the snare drum and make them roughly the same distance. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. I didn't have a tape measure one time, and so I actually used an old piece of rope and just held it with my fingers to measure my overhead mics. And I ended up getting pretty close, and it still sounded really good. But that's a good way. You can also use a single mono overhead mic. That cuts down on some of those issues. Use a ribbon mic as well. That cuts out some of the cymbal hash, and ribbon mics take EQ really well. Here's the overhead mic setup that I've been using lately. This is a pair of Audio-Technica Pro 37R microphones in a spaced pair configuration, and as you can see, they are roughly the same distance from the snare drum up there. And then I kind of adjust them up and down to taste until the cymbals sound right. In this case, they're, maybe 1.5 feet above the cymbals. And I have my cymbals roughly at the same height on both sides. Number 6, add reverb only to more distant mics for a more natural sound. I mean, if you're going to use artificial reverb, it's going to sound more natural if you add it to a distant mic that already has a little bit of room ambience, which most of the time you're going to have some room ambience on your drum sounds already. If you need to lengthen that, adding that artificial reverb plug-in or hardware unit, whatever it is, to a more distant mic is going to sound more natural and allow you to lengthen the natural ambience without it sounding fake. Finally, to sum up, there are a lot of different drum miking techniques, so depending on the style of music you're recording drums for, you may want to use a different mic technique. For rock and pop, you're going to probably close mic everything, have your overheads and some room mics and things like that, and have a lot of different sources to work with, which can sound great but also takes a lot more work in the mix. If you're doing something that's more folky, country, or jazz type stuff, less mic, something like the Glenn Johns mic setup technique that I used in my Soundtracks Topaz video a while back, that can work really well for certain styles of music. Even a lot of classic rock was done that way, so that's not a rule, but that's, there are no rules in recording anyway. But that's generally what I do. If I'm doing rock or pop, I'm going to close mic things more. If I'm doing country, folk, something playing with brushes or hot sticks or something, I'll use Glenn Johns, fewer mics. And that generally works really well for those styles of music. That's just a general idea. Choose your mic technique based on the sound that you're looking for, because there's a lot of different drum mic techniques. And you could probably invent one too. I mean, there's no rules. Recording is artwork, just like anything else. Music is art. There's no rules. Invent a new drum mic technique. But if you do, make sure you leave a comment and tell me what it is, so I can try it. Well, I hope you found this video and these tips interesting and informative. Feel free to take this stuff and modify it. Use any of the ideas that I presented in this video, or don't use any of them. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to help you out, and I felt like these were simple ideas that can help you get a good drum sound a lot quicker and with a lot less hassle. Plus, you don't really have to do any math for any of the stuff that I just talked about. And that's a good thing, because who likes to mess with math all the time? Well, I hope you found that informative and educational and you got something out of it. And I definitely hope that you all have an excellent day, night, evening, weekend, weekday, hour, minute, second, nanosecond, whatever it is you're having, have a good one. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.